So we talked about people follow people. Brand podcasts specifically also have some stats to support why you might consider this channel. So number one is it increases your brand awareness by 89%. The other piece of it is when people engage and listen to that podcast specifically, the brand consideration goes up 57%. And then finally, your purchase intent is increasing by 14% just by having a brand podcast. And a lot of research is showing that people are actively seeking like brands that they love and support. They actively are looking to see if they have a podcast as well. So those are just some specific stats to support the podcast story itself. And then finally, when we think about why podcasts, I'm not going to go through this whole list because it is a lot, but how it addresses sort of the haves and have-nots really uniquely comes back down to really one of two things. So number one, a podcast is a program. It is a channel that uniquely allows itself to evolve. Oftentimes when we create content, whether it's like a video series or a webinar or event, or even like written heavy content, it doesn't evolve. It's once and done. And you better hope it goes off with that hitch and you hope that it's great and that your idea came to life. Your podcast doesn't have to be like that. Your podcast is something that you can experiment with over time. You can evolve it. It kind of becomes like the consistent program that allows your content marketing to just never run dry. The other thing that I think is really unique about podcasting, and I mentioned it before, but it's kind of counterintuitive because of what we're talking about, but it is the last channel, is the last channel that exists that the power is in the people's hands. And what I mean by that is like, you don't know who's listening to your podcast unless they tell you that they're listening. And so as a marketer, you get the opportunity to create something worth opting into, worth letting you know that somebody's listening. And so the reason that's relevant is because when we think about this first party audience opportunity, and we'll talk about, how do you create CTAs at CYA kind of vibes. But when we think about the podcast specifically, that is a very special moment. If you are the creator or the marketer that launched this thing and somebody lets you know that they're listening to their podcast, you better believe that if they're letting you know that they're engaging with this content, that trust is very deep, which means that that's somebody who's going to opt in to spend more time with you in different mediums in different ways.